Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I'm going to be joined by a former guest from a while back, as we were just saying before we started recording here, Rob Hahn, who is now with Pattern, and he is the Chief Operations Officer over there. And he is going to talk to us a little bit about what Pattern does, get us familiar with that. But we're also going to talk a little bit about what happened with Amazon in Q4 of 2024. Supply chain powerhouse had some difficulties, some issues, and I think some of the sellers felt that. So we're going to dive a little bit into that today and also get an understanding too what kind of happens when that process goes into place and how people can prepare themselves as they work with Amazon in 2025 to prevent any of those disruptions as well. So Rob, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you for having me back. I'm glad I didn't
Definitely.
scare you off the first time. It has been a few years. Maybe you just don't remember. So,
No, definitely didn't scare me off there, and happy to get you back, definitely, and really appreciate your knowledge back then, and we'll appreciate it today as well. So last time we talked, you weren't with Pattern, so this is new to the podcast, but you've been there for a little bit now. So tell us a little bit about first up, I guess. Tell us a little bit about Pattern and what it is that you all do.
sure. Yeah, so I am the Chief Operations Officer here at Pattern. I've been here for about 2.5 years. Amazon is a tough place, but so are other marketplaces across the world, right?
Right.
So, Pattern actually is an accelerator. We're kind of the OG of that name, kind of coined that term of accelerator. We work with brands. We do a lot of different things, but our core kind of offering is around buying and selling inventory, but working very very closely directly with brands across the world. So we're marketplace agnostic. Certainly, Amazon is a big presence for us, but we sell in a bunch of markets. We've got sales. We've got Australia, Europe, China, Mexico, Canada. We're all over the world with our sales. So we're pretty agnostic to where that thing needs to be sold in an e-commerce platform. But we work with brands directly, and we end up investing in inventory in many of those relationships, or we end up actually buying and selling that inventory in marketplaces across the world. So we kind of do it all. We make it really easy for brands. We do anything ranging from logistics to reverse logistics to ads content with a lot of our own proprietary tech. We think of ourselves as a tech company in our core. We've got hundreds of developers. We've got chasing some really big, interesting tech problems, and we use that platform to accelerate brands globally. So that's
Yeah.
kind of like the backbone of Pattern. We've also got some other services that we offer outside of that core offering, but they're all kind of supporting that same function for a brand, and that is how do we sell on marketplaces across the world.
Yeah, very interesting there, and definitely, I think it's interesting too. It's kind of all encompassing these services for these brands, right? And you are handling the physical aspect in some cases too of that. You mentioned the logistics and reverse logistics, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the vast majority of the time we are doing that. I mean, we have, I'm former Amazon. I've got a bunch of former Amazonians and Walmart and Targets. Like we've got a bunch of pretty high-powered supply chain individuals on our team, as well as a homegrown tech stack that supports that. But it's what you said. And the reality is, I've said this for quite a long time now, and the in order for you to be a brand that is winning in e-commerce, you have to be world class at selling stuff. You got to be world class at moving stuff,
Mm.
and those two things working together infrequently exist within a brand, right?
That's true.
Like
Yeah.
most brands aren't great at both of those things. They're actually potentially a great operator but not a good builder, or a great builder but not a great operator. And so we get to work directly with brands and be an extension really of their team in so many ways, right? So a lot of like they work hard to build a brand, and they're like, hey, how do we get to that next step of acceleration and growth? And we kind of come in and we say, hey, we've got experts in every single area, and we can help and kind of hit the gas for a brand. So it's been a really cool experience of seeing working with some really awesome brands to kind of show them and work with them very very closely on how do we hit the gas across the world.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a great thing to point out there that you mentioned that, it's either typically it's either you're good at like the selling aspect or you're good at the movement of the product aspect. And, it's great that you're able to come and, as you said, like put that gas on it and really, kind of bring the two together and make it happen for those brands. And now you mentioned in there too that, you were formerly at Amazon. So tell us a little bit about your background there and those experiences that you're bringing to your role now, and also a little bit too about working at Amazon. And now I know you mentioned you do several different marketplaces, but obviously Amazon is a big one. What's it like kind of being on the other side of those things?
Yeah, well, I guess I'll very quick my background. So I started a long time ago now. It was Amazon.com back in the day when I started at Amazon, right? All my like I still have some of the swag of my initial t-shirts that were like it says Amazon.com. It wasn't
Mm,
Amazon. I remember coming back from like, getting my internship offer. I came back to my dorm room and I was like, "Hey, I got an offer for Amazon.com." My roommate
yeah.
was like, "What's that?" Which is crazy to think about. Like
Wow.
a
Yeah.
college student not even knowing what Amazon was, but that's like it's pretty early in Amazon years still at that time. Did not have the adoption that it does today. But I started as an intern. Then a lot of people took bets on me. I worked really hard as well.
Mm,
But I, moved up very quickly at Amazon. I ended up getting in the robotics space in 2015, which was very early on for
yeah.
Amazon, and ended up leading my own building at Amazon, a large Amazon robotics fulfillment center. Kind of bounced around the Midwest and then went over to Baltimore and got to run a building there with a super incredibly talented team, running an East Coast huge, giant, monolithic, over 1 million square foot building, doing a ton of
Mm,
volume. So that was a really cool. 2018, I left to join a startup called Whitebox. I was there last time we spoke.
right.
Kind of did a lot of the same concept of what Pattern does, except on the services side. Didn't really do like the buy sell model, but all of our own technology. We got to build something really cool. I was there for 4 years before transitioning here to the COO role here at Pattern in August of 2022. So that was my background. And the Amazon working at Amazon, I don't know. It's such a bigger company than it was. It really feels dramatically different
Mm,
than when I started my career there. But even when I ended my career, it's really changed quite a bit. It's gotten very big. Some of that's in some really good ways, right? Some maturity,
mm,
but a lot of ways, I think, not my style, right? It's hard. I mean, when you get that big, how do you? I mean, like it's easy to throw stones, and to be fair, stones should be thrown in many of these cases. Operating with Amazon, I think they could do it a lot better. But the
yeah.
reality is, like when you get that big, it's very hard to maintain some of the goodness that comes from being agile and caring about what we're doing and ensuring that what you're doing is building stuff for sellers. I think what kind of pushed me to think about operating outside of the Amazon ecosystem, at least directly in, not being at Amazon, but being in the ecosystem still, is that I was watching the complexity of the requirements we were putting on sellers and vendors and saying, like, this is actually getting harder and harder for us internally. So we have to push a lot of that complexity out. Because at
Mm,
Amazon, when you're inside, that product doesn't matter, that thing doesn't matter, that brand doesn't matter operationally. I just need to run the volume, right? Like it's
mm.
so insane. Like you cannot, if you've not been, I think you have been in one of the Amazon facilities, right? I think you have been.
I haven't been inside, but I've certainly seen videos and things.
I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, you could Google it. You can see it. They give tours
Mm,
actually on some of these buildings that you can go in and see them, like public tours. But I mean, it is great. The volume, the number of people, like there's a lot of transactions that are happening. All of the complexity cannot happen within the four walls of that warehouse, right? It really does need to be pushed out if you're
mm,
going to have something that's super repeatable, right? Inside any warehousing, which you know really well, right? You have this customization, kind of the counterbalance of scale, right? Like a lot of times you can't do both of those things extremely well. It's very hard to do that with figuring that out. And so with Amazon,
mm,
naturally, it is all about scale, right? So the you end up pushing it out to sellers. So as being on the other side of this has been really quite fun, frankly, because you get first of all inside Amazon, you don't get a relationship with brands, right?
yeah.
It's just stuff you're processing. So it's been a really unique and quite fun experience to go on the other side, working with brands and helping them navigate the complexity that Amazon has. It is the most complex environment ever, right? To
Mm,
operate in and operate with and to do really well. it's easy to list something on Amazon. It is not easy to do really well on Amazon, to scale, to grow, to solve all those problems.
Right.
So it's been really quite satisfying to work with brands, and extremely frustrating also to work with Amazon from the seller side when you know what's going on the inside. Like there's
Yeah.
some ground requirements that I helped establish back in the day because I was an inbound. Like inbound was my specialty.
Yeah.
So on the other side, I'm like, but that isn't needed anymore because you've got X, Y, and Z. That's a 15-year-old policy. And so there's some frustrations, but overall, it's been really quite satisfying to know what's going on in there and be able to help brands
Mm.
navigate it. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think that's super interesting too, where you said like, like some of these things, like I was part of setting up, and now I'm like, like we
Yeah, I
don't
mean,
need these anymore. Yeah,
some of
what did
them,
I do? Right?
I know I'm kind of kicking my own ass a little bit on a few of these things, but it's
Yeah.
the concept is I again, like it is nice knowing what's going on inside, because then I'm
Mm.
like, all right, how much does this matter? Do they care about that thing? Do they not care about this thing? And it's been good to be able to navigate on the outside. But I've very much enjoyed the brand relationships that I've been able to build and work
Mm.
with, because it's hard. This is hard to do. It is not simple. So it's been fun.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's great to hear too. And it's great to see like your excitement about it too. I think is really an interesting thing there. It's great that you're getting that experience from kind of all sides throughout your career. So so we want to talk about, and you mentioned throwing some stones here. So we want to talk
Let's
about
throw
some
some
of the
stones.
the problems that Amazon had in Q4. But I think before we do that, for maybe people that are not totally familiar, why don't we talk a little bit about kind of what's the normal process for, you mentioned there, you said that it's easy to like list a product, right, but then it's difficult to scale and grow and get it through there. So tell us about the normal process for kind of just getting product itself into Amazon.
Yeah, I mean, I think this has been this has even changed, even foundationally, of how to get things into Amazon in 2024. They're
Mm.
rolled out a new API and how to create shipments if you're a large scale shipper, or even going into Seller Central. Like the ship to Amazon workflow is relatively new in the last 12 to 18 months. It was in beta. It's now fully transitioned over in early 2024 as well. So I mean, one of the major ways that you get into Amazon is you say, hey, you have to decide, right? There's a couple different ways that you can sell on Amazon, right? There's
Mm.
kind of three major ways it's a little reductive, but it covers most scenarios. Basically, ships and sold by Amazon. That's where Amazon is the owner of that inventory and sells it. And then there's two other ones which are fulfilled, or that are merchant, right? So like I own the product that either I can ship it, that's called, fulfilled by merchant, FBM, or
Mhm.
FBA, fulfilled by Amazon. So I can send stuff into Amazon's fulfillment centers. They will do the fulfillment. This is now ubiquitous. Most sellers do that because it's a great product, frankly, right? That's how you get the next day, same day delivery, really fast delivery. You send it into Amazon's network. Traditionally, then they split it out into the fulfillment centers, and they end up getting it close to the end consumer. Then when a sale happens, they ship it and send it in. But foundationally, you tell Amazon, I want to send in 1,000 of widget A. Amazon says, send it here. And then you are on the hook to get transportation into them. You can use Amazon's network, you can use your own network, but you
Mm.
get it to them. They receive it, they store it where it's supposed to be, and then they ship it when a sale happens. So that foundational flow is no different in the past or forward, but all of the individual pieces have changed basically in the last 6 months, pretty foundationally.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, obviously FBA, there's a lot of talk about that. And I think, like you said, most sellers utilize that. And obviously Amazon has put together, a robust supply chain, right? I mean, it's one of the biggest things they're known for.
Yep.
Certainly, they've pushed the boundaries of speed on delivery, I think, for everybody in the industry. But I guess tell us a little bit about, we've been kind of teasing this here a little bit, this problems they've had, and then for people maybe that are not aware, I mean, what happened in the last quarter of 2024, and that's probably their biggest quarter, right? To see influx of
Yeah.
inventory too, as well, right? So tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about kind of what happened there.
I mean, I think really it's about what happened in 2024. It just all kind of came to
Mm.
a head in Q4. I think it happened for a few different various reasons. But Amazon did make some foundational shifts in 2024. So traditionally, kind of what I talked about before, there's a couple different networks. They would call them networks inside Amazon, right? So big
Mm.
stuff network, small stuff network. They've got a network of buildings that is basically they accept stuff, but they don't store it and ship it to end consumers. They just bring it in, they send it to the fulfillment center, which then stores it and ships it to the customer. Those are called cross docks at Amazon, and they have those for standard sized items, right, which are the smaller items.
Mm.
So traditionally, until early last year, well, coming up on a year ago now, last year in 2024, sellers would send it mostly into anywhere between like 1 and 3 of those cross docks, and they generally were close physically to wherever they were. So for example, our biggest facility is Hebron, Kentucky. It's right outside Cincinnati. We would end up sending to Indianapolis or Memphis or like something that's relatively close to that area. And most, like 80% of the volume initially or more, would end up going to, for example, Indianapolis, Indy 9
Okay.
is one of the buildings there. That cross dock, then they would split it up and get it across the country. Well, the problem is Amazon ended up running into this. Isn't like, something that they talk about as the root cause, but this is
Mhm.
behind the scenes, if you will. Amazon ended up getting too many fulfillment centers. And so what you end up getting is those cross docks physically can't send it to 200 fulfillment centers or whatever the number is.
Mm.
So you end up saying, if I send it to one facility, they can't get it everywhere it needs to be. So they started saying, I need you, the seller, to get it closer to the end consumer and essentially regionalize the different crosstalks. So instead, saying Indy 9, for example, would connect, or regional crosstalk in Indiana, for example, would go to fulfillment centers in the Midwest region. They would no longer send to California like Indy 9 was doing, for example. They would send it to facilities only within their region. And that regionalization that Amazon went through in 2024 forced a lot of things to change. And so you saw stuff like the inbound placement fee, which was a really prevalent change. And
Right.
instead of saying, I'm going to send it to one place, they started saying, I'm going to send it to 5 places. And those 5 places are basically the 5 inbound regions within Amazon's network. So they've got different outbound regions versus inbound regions. But the inbound regions are saying you're going to send it to 5 of my cross docks, and instead of sending it to Indianapolis and Indianapolis sending it to California, you're going to send it to California, and then in California, I will split it between the fulfillment centers in California.
Hmm.
So I'll pause there. Does that make sense? Did I explain that well enough?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so that piece, well, the complexity of that kind of spins out. Because if I'm a seller who sent 1 truckload a week, think about the implications of that. I used to send 1 full truckload. So the cost and the
Right.
complexity, I'd load it into 1 truck, I'd send it to Indianapolis. That cost was $500. Well, now I'm going to send those same 26 to 30 pallets, and I'm going to have to split them up into 5 shipments. I'm going to have to do LTL instead of full truckload.
Mm.
LTL is dramatically more expensive, and as
Yeah.
everyone knows, it is dramatically slower.
Right.
So effectively what Amazon ended up doing was saying, I'm going to have you split to 5 places instead of 1. And that really punched right in the gut of many sellers. That's more pickups, that's more storage on their dock. It's a massive complexity increase as well as cost. If that was everything that happened, it would have been annoying in Q4, but it wouldn't have been devastating. What ended up happening even more is Amazon launched simultaneously a 2-tiered cross-dock network. So if you can split it to 5 places, you're going to go to one of those regional crossdocks. Amazon created national crossdocks and regional ones. But if you couldn't split it to 5 ways, if you split it to 1 way or even 3 ways, you ended up sending it to the first cut before it goes to somewhere else. So it goes to a national crossdock. They would split up your volume and send it to regional crossdocks. So I'd send it to Indianapolis. They would then send it to the 5 regions on your behalf and charge you dollars to do that. So that touch in the transportation, I'm going to charge you a fee, but I'll get it to where it needs to go eventually. But it also adds something really important, and that's lead time. So you end up adding a bunch of time. So Amazon, if that would have happened in mid last year, it probably would have been something that is fine. The problem is they launched those 2-tier crossdocks in August, September, and October effectively.
Yeah.
2024. So right leading into the peak time, they were opening up buildings. So for example, like we would create shipments. We started getting shipments for buildings that were not yet open.
Hmm.
So Amazon had this like massive problem where they started having congestion happening because they blew up the LTL network. They were launching brand new buildings, and they got completely tied up with more inventory in transit between sites that they've ever seen.
Mm,
So it's not one thing. It's actually this confluence of, a bunch of different factors that end up really just creating the entire inbound network into a massive bind there in Q4. Simultaneously, one more fun piece was AWD, which is Amazon Warehousing and Distribution, which
mhm,
Amazon AWD salespeople started selling as the cure all for placement fees. So people started using it for the wrong reasons. AWD, because of this, got locked up in the middle of peak. So they were not accepting any new loads in. So then you had people trying to rush things in to get it in for the holiday and couldn't. They had no path to get in because you were
wow.
getting appointment times in January from October in some scenarios and for some buildings. And you also didn't have AWD you could send to, which then would distribute inventory. So that was a lot of words, but effectively you
Yeah.
had like 3 to 4 major things happen simultaneously, all leading up into the biggest time of the year.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, I think it's just craziness. I mean, and I started seeing where people were saying like, "Oh, there's problems here." Like, we're here, and sellers are like kind of freaking out because they're like, "Well, I'm gonna miss like the
You're gonna miss the
holiday
holiday, right?
season, right?"
Yeah.
Yeah, which so I mean, tell us a little bit about from the brands and stuff that you work with. I mean, what were some of the impacts there that they saw and some of the challenges?
It's a really interesting thing because this is one of those where large sellers that have volume
Hmm.
that can do full truckloads, like we send in a lot of volume, right?
Yeah.
We're Amazon's largest seller in the US. It's like well known. We're actually like globally, we're the largest seller, right? So we send in
Oh,
a lot of volume.
mm,
And so we have enough density. Density wins in this scenario, right? So like even as
mm,
if I split out a lot more, I'm sending many full truckloads every single day into Amazon's network. And so I'm able to get enough density to be able to send it into these facilities. But when you're a smaller or even mid-sized seller, you have to be very big to avoid some
yeah.
of that complexity having a massively negative impact. So it's been really interesting. Like we averaged 4.5 days to get it into Amazon's network, even through this madness. And
Mm,
that's a lot of things go into doing that really well, right? We got a really strong team. We have technology. We've got, a lot of planning and effort to be able to execute that. That's not easy to do. We had one of our brands that we were talking to in October. It was late October. They had an appointment time and it got rescheduled for January 11th.
mm,
And they were
yeah.
like, we don't know what to do now. And so it's been really interesting to be like, all right, we can help with that scenario, but being able to see the impacts to brands, it's literally some brands, they live and die by their ability to sell between Thanksgiving and Christmas, right? Like that's their
Yeah.
entire 80% of sales. So you see varying impacts. Some people less so because they're not as seasonally required. But when those brands that are, so seasonally heavy, it was a very challenging year. It's really scary in that scenario. So
Mm,
each brand had to navigate something slightly different. And the weird part is regionally, it ended up having a really different year because in the West Coast, it was severely worse than in the Midwest, for example. So if you're in the Midwest and you're shipping to the Midwest, a little bit easier. If you're on the West Coast, you were really tied up.
mm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's such a big thing, right? Because I think people like the regular consumer, I guess, probably doesn't realize all this stuff is like happening behind the scenes, right? And then they don't realize like the impact that's happening here, and it just kind of shows like too the I think the power that Amazon has in a sense in the consumer marketplace is, if they're like delayed, and they could be like dramatically impacting the business of a lot of other people as well, like these sellers that are trying to get stuff on Amazon there. So I'm curious. I mean, with this kind of, we would say, it's kind of like a stumble, a fail almost, right, on Amazon's
Yep.
part in Q4. I mean, uh, what do you think that kind of says about Amazon and what's going on with their supply chain? I mean, they're known for being this like icon in a sense in supply chain, and that other supply chains kind of look up to, right, in a
Yeah.
sense. But like, seeing this kind of falter, I mean, what do you think that is saying about their supply chain and what's going on there.
I still think some of the smartest people in the world are chasing these problems at
Yeah.
Amazon, right? Like I don't. Amazon will recover. There's a lot of people that are doing well there. They'll recover in some ways. Like some of this is recovery, and some of this is a foundational shift forever. Like the
Mm,
regional crosstalk and national crosstalks, the miss there was about the timing and the execution of it, but the concept is not actually horrible. The placement logic, two-tiered crosstalk network, probably not something I would have done personally, but
mm,
the 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 problem around how do I get stuff closer to consumers is not bad. It's actually better for Amazon. They get cheaper shipping costs, but it's better for the consumer and for the seller because we do see our data shows a correlation between same day and next day delivery and an increase in conversion, ad
mm,
effectiveness, everything else, right? Like Amazon wants to do sales. They reward sales in algorithms, buy box, etc., around proximity. So if you have something that's going to be able to deliver this afternoon from 2 to 6 p.m., you
yeah.
are more likely to buy it than if it's going to be there in 2 days. The way that happens is by improved logic for placement. So they're not wrong foundationally on what they're trying to solve for placement. The execution of it is when I said earlier about them just being too big. The people that are making decisions about we should do placement better are not the people that are saying what's our physical network able to do, and that's
Mm,
also a different group of people that care about how the sellers interact with that network. So you've just got a company that is now big enough that there's this huge gap between the people that are end up trying to solve the problems, and it creates them trying to say I'm building something that is only scalable and not customizable. It's the same thing we come back to at the very beginning. And so I think what all that it says about Amazon is they're super smart people. They're still trying to solve a lot of the right problems. I think it gets harder and harder as time goes on for Amazon to create solutions for everyone. And
mm,
I've said this phrase before, but like basically they've built it for everyone now. So they've built it for no one. It doesn't
mm.
work for a lot of people. It works for the average seller, but the average seller isn't the one that's going to have growth in the Amazon ecosystem. So I think you just got a gap here between the people building it and the people that actually know how to operate it. I think that's what more than anything else what it says about Amazon in the state they're in today.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I'm sure they have, some of the smartest people out there like working on this stuff and trying to figure
Very
it out. I mean, they are still Amazon, right? So I mean, like,
still
they're
Amazon.
huge and they have the resources to kind of figure these things out. And but from a seller's perspective, what can sellers do, and how can they be maybe more prepared in 2025 now to handle some of this new stuff, or maybe additional kind of problems that may arise later this year?
I mean, it's a little depressing, but as operators, like 2025 peak
Mm,
already started. Right?
yeah.
Like I think the reality is that's what it's life in that's what it's like in the life of an operator, right?
Yeah.
We, I mean, if you think about when you start bringing over inventory from your manufacturer wherever in the world, like you are placing those orders in the summer, which
Mm,
means you need to know where they're going to land, you need to know how they're going to get in, you need to know lead times well ahead of time. That means right now you're starting the foundational work for 2025. I so I think starting early is the first thing that sellers can do. Like, what is the way that we need to make sure we need to get it in? I think the foundational thing is Amazon will not solve this problem for sellers. I think that's the biggest thing that we learned in 2024.
mm,
We have to figure this out for ourselves in so many ways, ranging from partner carrier changes all the way through, you know, API changes, fulfillment networks. Like Amazon is not our savior. They will not figure it out for us. I actually personally have a really decent passion here for I believe that we can figure it out together. I think
mm,
that sellers are not against each other in this so many times in so many ways. We
yeah.
actually can work together. Like one of the things that we have a mission for, we're started selling some of our fulfillment services outside of like doing it for our core partners. So if you're a large seller or a seller and you want to use our transportation services, for example, to get it into Amazon, you can ride along with our boxes going into Amazon and
Mm,
share in the savings of cost there. I really do genuinely believe that we've got an opportunity to work together as sellers to create our own density and getting into Amazon with lower friction and lower cost structure. I genuinely believe that sellers, and we're not the only ones that will do that and have that it makes sense to it. We're just the biggest, and we've got the hardware. So we spent millions of dollars in hardware and software in our fulfillment network. We just launched a new Vegas facility to get closer to the West Coast.
Right.
I really do believe that sellers banding together and not relying on Amazon will end up being the most frictionless way to go. I mean, if you asked an average seller and you told them that I averaged 4.5 days going to Amazon this year, they
Mhm.
would laugh because like most of them, people were waiting 45 days in some scenarios to get things into the Amazon network.
Wow.
That is not an accident. It's because we were working with so many brands together. I think
Mm.
that kind of idea is how do we band together and deliver something in 2025 that was dramatically different than 2024. It will be challenging again this year. How do we navigate it a little bit better than we have in the past?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a great perspective to have on it because I think there is, not only just in this, Amazon scenario, but I think like supply chain as a whole, like I feel like there's a lot of opportunities for companies to, figure out how do we pool resources in a sense to get better advantages there. And I think that's, it's certainly a big ask and a big hill to climb and figure out to bring all these parties together to do that. I mean, we saw, what was it, American Eagle, right? Bought out Quiet Platforms, and that
Yeah.
was kind of like the idea there and their
Yep.
hope, right? But certainly, like definitely a difficult thing sometimes to be like, hey, like you're my competitor, but like let's share transportation, right? Like like somebody's gonna be like, what?
I think the reality is in many scenarios we're not actually competitive on the thing, right? Like there are
Yeah.
things where on the marketplace, one of the Jeff Bezos basically was asked back, I don't know, this is like some 60 Minutes interview. It's one of my, I don't always quote Jeff Bezos, but like this is one of the times where I will.
Okay.
But he ends up saying in like this interview, somebody was like, um, Walmart has joined e-commerce. Like, is Amazon done? Is it over? And he
Mm,
basically was like, I don't know what Walmart will do. Like, we'll see. Like, maybe they do really well. But this space is growing still at a pace that there's going to be lots of winners.
mm,
And I think we're still in that in e-commerce. We're still early in the expansion of e-commerce. So I think we think of ourselves being very competitive sometimes, but there's a lot of pie, and that pie is continuing to grow at a very consistent pace. That means that there's going to be lots and lots of winners. So I think as we go along the way, reducing cost structure, improving times for everyone. I get benefit if I get more people in here, but also other people get
mhm.
benefits too. So I think putting that all aside a little bit and really focusing on the problem that we're all trying to solve, I think is it's a fun problem to solve actually, and doing it together is much better. Like learning from each other than trying to do it on your own. So yeah, I mean, I definitely it's a conversation I have sometimes, but like I
Yeah.
just kind of don't care, right? Like I don't care if you're my competitor. Let's just solve a tough problem together, and it's been fun to partner with a ton of brands that are thinking the same way.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and I think that's a great thing too because there is, I echo that sentiment. I mean, I think the same. Like, there's plenty of food to go around, right? And plenty of seats at the table to be had, and the industry is not going anywhere. I mean, I think we've seen that the supply chain in general has just become more and more prevalent, and it's needed at the end of the day. I mean, people need their stuff, like,
Yeah.
so there's always going to be opportunity there. So really interesting to talk to you and kind of dissect and learn a little bit about what happened here with Amazon. And you mentioned that you guys just opened a new facility in Vegas. So tell us a little bit about kind of what's coming up this year for Pattern.
Yeah, I mean, we our kind of core business, we've had really good growth, right? We're in a good spot from I think our core offering of what we've got, both from the I'm going to say the move stuff side of the thing and the sell
Mhm.
stuff side. We've got a really nice blend of partnership with our brands. We're pretty excited about where we are. We're pretty excited about our offering sitting in like the competitive space that we are in. But we're also expanding on, like I said, services. We have a product called Middle Mile that you can just send in stuff to one facility and we'll split it up for you. You don't pay placement fees. You send it to us and we split it out for you. We can bring things in. We can do prep, for example, right? We can create the shipments on Amazon and send it in as well. So we do D2C fulfillment. So we're building out kind of the 3PL services that surround our core offering on the fulfillment side. And I think that's been really exciting. So we launched Vegas, getting closer to the West Coast, especially with the regionalization happening with Amazon. That
Mhm.
math problem got a little easier, right? Because then I'm shipping things from the West Coast into the West Coast. And we can do some cool stuff like zone skipping and some other pretty unique things that people that don't have our scale can't do. So we're really investing a lot in what our network looks like in 2025 and beyond. But I mean, we will do many units, like millions and millions and millions of units every single month into Amazon through our network. We're
Yeah.
pretty excited about some pretty state of the art technology that's going to exist within the Vegas building. We just launched it, and at the end of Q1, we're going to be, really launching the full, the full. Actually, we're going to be at. I'm speaking at Manifest. I'll be there. I think you'll probably be at Manifest as well. I
We'll
believe.
be there. Yeah, we'll have a booth there.
Yeah,
Definitely.
like and Prosper, we're actually going to be putting on a tour of our one of our warehouse of our new warehouse in Vegas, for example.
Nice.
So like we're pushing out a lot of really cool stuff, and we're pretty open book. We think we're all trying to solve the same problem here, so we're people can come through and see how we're solving the problem. So we're pretty excited about the growth that we've had and what we expect here in 2025.
Awesome, awesome. Definitely looking forward to that, and definitely looking forward to seeing you at Manifest too there as well. So it's been great to talk to you today, learn more about Pattern and kind of some of these challenges with Amazon, and some ideas on how to go about them, and improve for this year, and maybe not have as many challenges at the end of this year, hopefully, for people out there, right? So definitely appreciate you coming on, Rob, and talking to me. If people are interested in learning more about Pattern, what's the best way to do that?
There's on the website pattern.com. You can go through our multiple products. There's a fulfillment tab if you want to specifically reach out to us. There's a contact us there. You can see videos of our fulfillment centers, but pattern.com is a great place to start.
All right, awesome. And we'll definitely put that in the show notes, and also at the newwarehouse.com. So, Rob, thank you once again for your time on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning into today's video here on our YouTube channel, the New Warehouse Podcast, and I appreciate you tuning in. If you liked what you saw, make sure you subscribe to our channel, and if you like this video in particular, make sure you like it as well. And if you want to get this great t-shirt that you see in the video behind me, Warehouses Are Sexy, head to warehousesAreSexy.com and get your own.